The stagecoach wheel cracked against a hidden boulder, and Helena Norton felt herself flying through the air before she even understood what was happening. She hit the hard desert ground with a force that knocked every bit of air from her lungs, her carpetbag landing somewhere in the distance with a muffled thud. The world spun in a haze of dust and pain as she gasped for breath, her ribs screaming in protest. When her vision finally cleared, she saw the stagecoach careening down the slope without her, the driver apparently unaware he had lost a passenger. She opened her mouth to scream, but only a hoarse whisper emerged from her parched throat. Helena pushed herself to her knees, watching in horror as the stagecoach disappeared around a bend in the landscape, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the oppressive silence of the Texas desert. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone in a vast expanse of sand and rock under a sun that beat down like a physical weight. It was July of 1882, and she had traveled all the way from Philadelphia to become the bride of a rancher named Marcus Sullivan, a man she had never met but who had promised her a home and a future through carefully penned letters over the past 6 months. Now she stood in the middle of nowhere, her traveling dress torn at the hem, her bonnet askew, and her throat already aching with thirst. The canteen she had brought was in her carpetbag, which lay perhaps 20 yards away, half buried in sand. Helena stumbled toward it, her legs shaking beneath her skirts. She reached the bag and pulled it open with trembling fingers, searching desperately for the canteen. It was not there. She dumped the contents onto the sand, frantically sorting through her spare dress, her undergarments, the daguerreotype of her mother, her Bible, a few precious books. The canteen must have fallen out during the accident. Helena spun in a circle, scanning the desert floor, but saw nothing except endless stretches of rocky sand dotted with scrub brush and the occasional yucca plant. Her heart began to pound in her chest, a different kind of fear settling over her now. The stagecoach had been heading to Terlingua, Texas, a small mining town near the Rio Grande where Marcus was supposed to meet her. But how far were they from town when she fell? An hour. 2. She had dozed off in the heat and had no idea. Helena looked at the sun, already past its zenith, but still blazing with merciless intensity. She had perhaps 4 or 5 hours until sunset. She knew enough to understand that walking in the desert without water was death. But staying here was also death. The stagecoach would not be coming back this way, and Marcus would not know where to look for her even if he realized she had not arrived. Helena gathered her belongings, stuffing them back into the carpetbag with shaking hands. She would have to walk and pray that she found the road again, or that someone found her. The first hour was bearable. Helena walked in what she hoped was the right direction, following the faint impressions in the sand that might have been wagon tracks. Her mouth grew dry, her tongue feeling thick and swollen. The second hour was harder. Her head began to ache, a dull throb that matched the rhythm of her footsteps. She stumbled over rocks she would have easily avoided earlier, and twice she had to stop and lean against a boulder to catch her breath. By the third hour, Helena knew she was in serious trouble. Her vision had started to blur at the edges, and she could no longer produce saliva. Every breath felt like she was inhaling fire. Her dress clung to her body, soaked with sweat, and she knew she was losing precious moisture with every step. She thought of her mother, who had died of consumption 3 years ago, leaving Helena alone in the world with no family and few prospects. Becoming a mail-order bride had seemed like an adventure, a chance at a new life. Now it seemed like it would be the death of her. She did not remember falling the first time, only finding herself on her hands and knees in the sand, her carpetbag lying beside her. Helena forced herself to stand, swaying like a drunkard. The sun was lower now, turning the sky shades of orange and gold that would have been beautiful if she had not been dying. She tried to walk again but managed only a few steps before her legs gave out entirely. This time, she could not get up. Helena lay on her side in the sand, staring at the horizon through eyes that seemed to see double. She thought she heard something, a rhythmic sound that might have been hoofbeats or might have been her own heart thundering in her ears. She closed her eyes, praying for mercy, for a swift end, for forgiveness for all the times she had been impatient or unkind. The sound grew louder, definitely hoofbeats. Helena tried to lift her head, but the effort was too much. She managed only to open her eyes as a shadow fell across her face, blocking out the brutal sun. A man on horseback loomed above her, silhouetted against the sky like some desert spirit. "Jesus Christ," she heard him say, his voice rough and deep. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Helena tried to speak, but her throat would not work. She made a small sound, barely more than a whisper. The man swung down from his horse with practiced ease, dropping to his knees beside her. She caught a glimpse of a weathered face, deeply tanned, with eyes the color of creek water after rain. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "You are burning up," he said, placing a hand on her forehead. Hold on now." He reached for something at his hip, and a moment later Helena felt the blessed coolness of a canteen against her lips. Water trickled into her mouth, and she would have gulped it down desperately if he had not pulled it away. "Easy," he said firmly. "Too much too fast and you will be sick. Just a little at a time." He let her have another small sip, then another, rationing it carefully despite the whimper of protest she made when he took the canteen away. He poured some of the water onto his bandana and wiped her face gently, the cool cloth feeling like heaven against her burning skin. "What happened?" he asked. "Where did you come from?" Helena's voice came out as barely a croak. "Stagecoach. Fell." His eyes widened. "You fell off the stage. When?" "Hours," she managed. 3, maybe 4. He cursed under his breath, a word no gentleman would have used in front of a lady, but Helena found she did not care. He gave her another careful sip of water, and this time she felt it actually reach her stomach. The relief was indescribable. "Can you ride?" he asked. "My ranch is not too far from here, maybe 40 minutes. I need to get you somewhere cool, get some water in you proper." Helena tried to nod, though the movement made her head swim. The man slipped his arms under her and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. She found herself cradled against his chest, pressed against a shirt that smelled of horse and leather and clean sweat. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently ground-tied, and somehow managed to mount while still holding her. He settled her across his lap, one arm wrapped securely around her waist. "I am Will," he said as he turned the horse's head. "Will Johnson. Try to stay awake for me, all right? What is your name?" "Helena," she whispered. "Helena Norton." "Well, Miss Norton, you are about the luckiest unlucky woman I have ever met. Another hour out here and you would have died." She believed him. As Will urged his horse into an easy lope, Helena let her head rest against his shoulder, too weak to hold herself upright. The motion of the horse should have been uncomfortable, but she was beyond caring about comfort. She drifted in and out of awareness, surfacing occasionally to find Will giving her another careful sip of water or adjusting his grip on her. "Almost there," she heard him say at one point. "Stay with me now." The sun was setting when they arrived at Will's ranch, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and purple. Helena had a vague impression of a low adobe house, a barn, corrals with horses moving in the evening shadows. Will dismounted carefully, still holding her, and carried her into the house. The interior was blessedly cool after the heat of the day. Will laid her on a bed in what appeared to be a small bedroom, then immediately began working to help her. He brought a basin of water and a cloth, wiping down her face and neck, her arms, anywhere the skin was exposed. He held a cup to her lips, and this time he let her drink more, though still carefully. "Your dress is soaked through," he said, his tone matter of fact. "You need to get out of it before you catch a chill. Can you manage that yourself, or do you need help?" Helena felt her face flush, but she nodded weakly. "I can manage. I will be right outside the door. Call if you need anything." He left, closing the door behind him, and Helena struggled to sit up. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her bodice, clumsy and weak. It took her what felt like an eternity to get out of the heavy traveling dress and the sweat-soaked layers beneath. She found a nightgown in her carpet bag, which Will must have retrieved from the desert, and managed to pull it over her head before collapsing back onto the bed. "Are you decent?" Will called from outside. "Yes," Helena answered, her voice still hoarse but stronger than before. He came back and carrying a bowl of something that smelled wonderful. "Beans and a little salt pork," he said. "Nothing fancy, but you need to eat. Get your strength back." Helena sat up against the pillows he arranged behind her and accepted the bowl. The food was simple, but it tasted better than anything she had ever eaten. Will sat in a chair by the bed, watching her with those unusual gray-green eyes. "So," he said after a moment, "what is a woman from back east doing on a stagecoach to Terlingua?" Helena swallowed a mouthful of beans. "How did you know I am from back east? Your accent, your clothes, even torn up, the way you carry yourself." He tilted his head. "Philadelphia." "Yes," she admitted, surprised. "I was coming to Terlingua to marry a man named Marcus Sullivan. He owns a ranch there. We have been corresponding for 6 months, and he sent me the money for passage." Something shifted in Will's expression, but it was gone so quickly Helena thought she might have imagined it. "Marcus Sullivan," he repeated. "I know Marcus. Good man from what I hear. Successful rancher." "You do not sound entirely convinced," Helena observed. Will shrugged. "I have only met him a handful of times. Seemed decent enough. A bit older, but steady." "How much older?" Helena asked, suddenly curious. "I would guess around 50, maybe 55. Helena nearly dropped her spoon. 55. Marcus had not mentioned his age in his letters, and foolishly, she had assumed he was closer to her own age of 23. But what did it matter? She had come here to marry him, to have a home and security. Age was irrelevant. "I see," she said quietly. Will seemed to read her thoughts. "You did not know," he never said. "I never asked." Helena set down the bowl, her appetite suddenly gone. "It does not matter. I made a commitment." "Even if you nearly died trying to keep it, the accident was not his fault." "No," Will agreed. "But you are not married yet, if you have doubts." "I have nowhere else to go," Helena said simply. "No family, no home. Marcus offered me both. That is more than most women in my position can hope for." Will was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "What happened to your family?" "My mother died 3 years ago. My father died when I was young. There was a little money from my mother's estate, but it ran out." Helena looked down at her hands. "I worked as a seamstress for a while, but the pay was terrible and the conditions worse. When I saw Marcus's advertisement, it seemed like Providence. And now I will rest, recover, and continue to Terlingua to meet my intended." Helena met his eyes. "But I owe you my life, Mr. Johnson. I will never be able to repay that debt." "You do not owe me anything," Will said gruffly. "Any decent person would have done the same." "Perhaps. But it was you who found me." Helena paused. "How did you happen to be out there?" "It seemed so far from anywhere. I was tracking a couple of strays that broke through a fence, found them and was heading home when I saw something on the ground in the distance. thought it might have been a dead animal at first. He gave her a small, wry smile. Glad I was wrong. Helena found herself smiling back despite everything. There was something about Will Johnson that put her at ease, something honest and straightforward in his manner. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged way that was entirely different from the men she had known in Philadelphia. His hands were calloused and strong, his forearms tanned and roped with muscle. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "You should rest," Will said, standing. "I will check on you in a few hours, make sure you are drinking enough water. The effects of heat exhaustion can linger. Where will you sleep? I have a bedroll. I will be fine on the floor in the main room." "I cannot take your bed," Helena protested. "You already have," Will pointed out, "and you need it more than I do. No arguments." He left before she could protest further, closing the door quietly behind him. Helena lay back against the pillows, her body aching but her mind strangely alert. She thought about Marcus Sullivan, a 55-year-old rancher she had never met, and tried to imagine herself as his wife. She thought about the letters he had sent, which had been cordial but not particularly warm, businesslike in their discussion of his ranch and his needs for a helpmate. Then she thought about Will Johnson, who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return, whose smile was crooked and genuine, and who looked at her like she was a person, not a commodity. She pushed that thought away firmly. She was engaged to Marcus Sullivan, and Will was simply a kind stranger. Nothing more. But as she drifted off to sleep, it was Will's face she saw in her mind and Will's arms she remembered holding her safe. Helena woke in the night, disoriented and desperately thirsty. She sat up in the darkness, trying to remember where she was. The events of the day came back to her in a rush, and she saw a pitcher of water on the table beside the bed, a cup next to it. Will must have left them for her. She poured herself a cup and drank it down, then another, her body craving the moisture. She heard a sound from the other room and realized Will must be awake as well. Helena set down the cup and hesitated, then rose from the bed. Her legs were shaky but held her weight as she made her way to the door and opened it quietly. Will was sitting at a rough wooden table, a lamp burning low, poring over what appeared to be a ledger. He looked up at the sound of the door, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked, starting to rise. "I am fine, just thirsty." Helena gestured to the pitcher. "Thank you for leaving the water. You need to drink as much as you can for the next few days. Your body lost a lot of moisture." He studied her in the lamplight. "How do you feel?" "Sore, tired, but much better than I did." Helena moved closer to the table. "What are you working on?" "Ranch accounts, trying to figure out if I can afford to buy more cattle this fall." He rubbed his eyes. "The numbers are not encouraging." Helena sat down across from him without invitation, curious despite herself. "May I see?" Will looked surprised but pushed the ledger toward her. Helena studied the columns of figures, her seamstress's mind quickly picking out the patterns. She had always been good with numbers, a skill that had served her well when she had been managing her mother's dwindling estate. "Your expenses for feed seem high," she observed. "Are you buying hay?" "Some. The drought last year killed off a lot of the natural grazing." "What about water rights? Are you paying for access?" "To the creek that runs through the north section, yes. The previous owner sold those rights separately, and I am still trying to buy them back." Helena did some quick calculations. If you reduced your herd size by about 15%, you could get by on less feed and less water. The money you save could go toward purchasing the water rights. Once you own those outright, you could expand the herd again. Will stared at her. "That is actually not a bad idea. I managed my mother's household finances for years. You learn to make difficult choices when money is tight." Helena traced a finger down the column of numbers. Also, you are paying too much for supplies. Who do you buy from? General store in Terlingua. Are there other options? Sometimes merchants will lower prices if they know they have competition. There is a trader who comes through about once a month. I never thought to use him for regular supplies. You should. Even if he does not have everything, the store owner will know you have alternatives. It gives you leverage to negotiate. Will leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Marcus Sullivan is getting himself quite a bride, a woman who can run a household and manage accounts. Helena felt her cheeks warm at the praise. I am simply practical. You are more than that. Will's expression grew serious. Helena, can I ask you something, and will you give me an honest answer? I will try. Do you love Marcus Sullivan? The question caught her off guard. I have never met him. How could I love him? Exactly my point. You are about to marry a man you do not love who is more than twice your age just because you need security. Will leaned forward. That is no kind of life. What other life is there for a woman like me? Helena asked quietly. I have no money, no family, no prospects. Marcus is offering me a home, respectability, a place in the world. That is more than love. That is survival. What if there was another option? Helena's heart began to beat faster. What do you mean? Will seemed to struggle with himself for a moment, then spoke in a rush. Stay here. Work for me as a housekeeper. I can pay you a small wage, not much, but enough to save. You would have your own room, your independence. No obligations beyond keeping the house and maybe helping with the books since you have a talent for it. Mr. Johnson. Will, he corrected. If we are going to be discussing business, call me Will. Will, Helena repeated, testing the name on her tongue. That is a generous offer, but I cannot accept it. I gave my word to Marcus. He paid for my passage. He is expecting me. He is expecting a mail-order bride. Any bride. You could send him a letter explaining what happened, return the money for your passage when you have saved enough. And be known as a woman who breaks her word, who takes a man's money and then backs out of an agreement. Helena shook her head. My reputation would be ruined. No decent man would have me. I am not talking about decent men. I am talking about you having choices. Helena stood, suddenly agitated. I appreciate what you are trying to do, truly, but I made my choice when I answered Marcus's advertisement. I have to see it through. Will stood as well, moving around the table. He was close enough now that Helena could see the flecks of gold in his gray-green eyes, could smell the faint scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Even if it makes you miserable, he asked softly. How do you know it will make me miserable? Marcus might be a wonderful man. He might be. But you will never know if you love him or if you simply needed him. The words hit too close to home. Helena turned away, her throat tight. I should go back to bed. Thank you for the water and for the conversation. She fled to the bedroom before Will could say anything else, closing the door and leaning against it. Her hands were shaking, and she felt tears prickling at her eyes. Why had Will's offer tempted her so much? It was foolishness to even consider it. She had to marry Marcus. It was the practical thing, the sensible thing. But as she climbed back into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin, she could not stop thinking about the earnestness in Will's voice when he had asked her to stay. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Helena recovered her strength under Will's watchful care, drinking water until she thought she would slosh, eating the simple but nourishing meals he prepared. Her headache faded, and the dizziness disappeared. By the 3rd day, she felt almost herself again, though her skin was burnt and peeling from her time in the desert. Will was careful to maintain a respectful distance, but there was an ease between them that felt both comfortable and dangerous. They fell into a natural rhythm. Helena would help with morning chores, Feeding the chickens Will kept and collecting eggs, while Will tended to the horses and cattle. They would eat breakfast together. Then Will would ride out to check fences or move cattle, while Helena tidied the house and prepared the noon meal. In the afternoons, when the heat was too intense for heavy work, they would sit in the shade of the porch and talk. Will told her about his life, how he had come to Texas 5 years ago from Kansas, how he had worked as a ranch hand until he had saved enough to buy this small spread of land. He spoke of his dreams of building the ranch into something substantial, of maybe having a family someday. Helena told him about Philadelphia, about growing up in a city where the buildings were tall and close together, where you could hear your neighbors through the walls. She told him about her mother's illness, the slow decline that had taken 3 years and all their money. She told him about the loneliness of being the last of her line, with no siblings, no cousins, no one to call family. "That is why you answered Marcus's advertisement," Will said on the third afternoon. "You want a family." "I want to belong somewhere," Helena corrected. "I want to matter to someone. You matter to me." The words hung in the air between them. Helena looked at Will, saw the intensity in his eyes, and felt her heart skip a beat. "Will, I know you have made your decision. I am not trying to change your mind." He paused. "But I want you to know that if you ever need anything, if Marcus turns out to be not what you hoped, you can come to me. No strings attached, just help from a friend. You barely know me. I know enough." Will's voice was quiet but firm. "I know you are brave and smart and stronger than you think. I know you managed to walk for hours in the desert when most people would have given up. I know you look at my ranch accounts and see possibilities I missed. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes, and you are not afraid to tell me when I am being stubborn. You have only known me for 3 days. Some people you just know," Will said simply. "From the moment I saw you lying in that sand, something in me said this woman matters. I cannot explain it better than that." Helena felt tears sting her eyes. "This is not fair. I know I am sorry." Will stood, putting distance between them. "I will ride you into Terlingua tomorrow. Marcus will be worried, and you have already delayed long enough." He walked away before Helena could respond, leaving her alone on the porch with her tumbling thoughts. She pressed her hands to her face, feeling the sting of her sunburned cheeks. This was ridiculous. She had known Will Johnson for 3 days. 3 days. That was not enough time to develop real feelings for someone. It was simply gratitude, confusion, the aftermath of trauma. But deep in her heart, Helena knew that was a lie. What she felt for Will was real and growing stronger by the hour. And tomorrow she would ride away from him and marry Marcus Sullivan, and that would be the end of it. That night, Helena could not sleep. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the desert night. The chirp of crickets, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft rustle of wind through the mesquite trees. She thought about her mother, who had married Helena's father for love and had been happy, desperately happy, until the day he died. She thought about the years after, when her mother had slowly faded away, as if losing her husband had taken some essential part of her. Helena had always told herself she would be practical, that she would not be foolish enough to marry for love. Love did not put food on the table or a roof over your head. Love did not protect you from poverty and hardship. But as she lay in Will's bed, in Will's house, her heart aching with feelings she did not want to name, Helena wondered if she had been wrong. Maybe love was worth the risk. Maybe belonging to someone, really belonging, was worth any price. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. Helena dressed in her spare dress, which was clean but plain, and braided her hair. She looked at herself in the small mirror Will had hung on the wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was thinner, her skin tanned and peeling, her eyes holding a seriousness that had not been there a week ago. She was not the same woman who had boarded that stagecoach in San Antonio. The desert had changed her, and Will had changed her, and she did not know how to be the woman Marcus Sullivan was expecting. Helena found Will in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. He handed her one without a word, and they drank in silence. The easy companionship of the past few days was gone, replaced by a tension that made Helena's stomach hurt. "I saddled a horse for you," Will said finally. "A gentle mare named Rosie. It is about an hour's ride to Terlingua. We should leave soon, before the day gets too hot." "All right." They finished their coffee, and Helena gathered her carpet bag. Everything she owned was in that bag, which suddenly seemed like a very small amount for a whole life. Will helped her mount the mare, his hands careful and impersonal on her waist. He swung up onto his own horse, the bay gelding that had carried them both that first day, and turned toward the road. The ride to Terlingua was quiet. Helena tried to memorize everything. The way the morning light turned the rocks golden, the shadow of a hawk circling overhead, the particular set of Will's shoulders as he rode ahead of her. She wanted to remember this, all of it, because after today it would be over. Terlingua appeared in the distance, a small collection of adobe buildings clustered near the creek. It was not much of a town, but it had a raw vitality to it, people moving purposefully between buildings, wagons loaded with supplies. Will led her down the main street to a building with a sign that read Sullivan Ranch Headquarters. "Marcus owns a second property in town," Will explained. "He uses it for business. Chances are he will be here." He dismounted and helped Helena down, then tied both horses to the rail. Helena smoothed her dress with nervous hands, her heart pounding. This was it. In a few moments, she would meet the man she was going to marry. Will knocked on the door, and a voice from inside called for them to enter. They stepped into a neat office with a desk, filing cabinets, and several chairs. A man stood from behind the desk, and Helena got her first look at Marcus Sullivan. He was indeed around 55, with gray hair and a weather-beaten face. He was not unattractive, but there was a hardness to his features, a calculation in his eyes as they swept over Helena. She felt herself being assessed like livestock at auction and had to suppress a shudder. "Well," Marcus said, "I take it you are my missing bride, Helena Norton." "Yes, sir." "I apologize for the delay. There was an accident, so I heard. The stage driver said you fell off somewhere between here and the canyon, said he did not notice until he got to town." Marcus's tone was disapproving. "Careless of you." Helena blinked, stung. "The coach hit a boulder. I was thrown clear. And I found her half dead in the desert," Will added, his voice hard. "She walked for hours trying to find help. She is lucky to be alive." Marcus's eyes shifted to Will, and something cold flickered in their depths. "Will Johnson. I should have known you would be involved somehow, always playing the hero." "I was not playing anything. I was trying to keep her from dying." "And I am grateful," Marcus said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "You will be compensated for your trouble, of course." "I do not want compensation." "Nevertheless, you will have it. I do not like being in anyone's debt." Marcus turned back to Helena. "I assume you are recovered enough to fulfill your obligations. The wedding is arranged for tomorrow. Reverend Peters will perform the ceremony. Tomorrow. So soon." Helena felt panic flutter in her chest. "Yes, of course. Good. I have a room prepared for you at the boarding house. You will stay there tonight, and we will marry in the morning. After that we will travel to the ranch. It is a half-day's ride from here." It was all so businesslike, so transactional. Marcus spoke of their wedding the way another man might speak of a cattle purchase. Helena glanced at Will and saw her own dismay reflected in his face. "If you will excuse us," Will said tightly, "I need to speak with Miss Norton privately for a moment." "About what?" Marcus demanded. "About whether she is certain she wants to go through with this." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus stepped around the desk, his posture aggressive. "You have something to say, Johnson. Say it to me." "I am saying that Helena deserves better than a man who looks at her like she is a commodity he purchased. I am saying that maybe she should have more time to think about what she is doing. She has had 6 months to think about it. We have a contract. A contract can be broken. Not without consequences." Marcus's voice was soft and dangerous. "Miss Norton came here on my money with my support. If she backs out now, she will owe me every cent I spent on her passage, plus damages for breach of contract. Do you have that kind of money, Johnson? Because I know your little ranch is barely scraping by." Will's jaw tightened, and Helena could see him struggling with his temper. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "It is all right," she said softly. "Mr. Sullivan is right. We have an agreement, Helena. Thank you for everything, Will. I will never forget your kindness." She turned to Marcus, lifting her chin. "I am ready to fulfill my obligations, Mr. Sullivan. If you will show me to the boarding house, I can prepare for tomorrow." Marcus smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Of course. This way." Helena picked up her carpetbag and followed Marcus to the door. She looked back once and saw Will standing in the middle of the office, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his face a mask of frustration and pain. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that moment, Helena felt something inside her crack wide open. Then Marcus was ushering her outside and the door closed and Will was gone. The boarding house was clean but sparse, the room Marcus showed her to containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. He left her there with instructions to be ready by 9 the next morning, and Helena sat on the bed, staring at the walls, feeling numb. What had she done? She had made a promise, yes, but at what cost? She thought of Will's face as she left, the way he had looked at her like she was something precious. She thought of Marcus's cold appraisal, the way he had spoken about money and contracts and obligations. This was the life she had chosen. A practical life. A safe life. A miserable life. Helena put her face in her hands and wept. She must have cried herself to sleep because she woke hours later to darkness and the sound of something tapping at her window. Helena sat up, disoriented, and the tapping came again. She rose and went to the window, pulling aside the thin curtain. Will was outside, mounted on his horse, holding a pebble in his hand. When he saw her at the window, he gestured urgently for her to come down. Helena's heart began to pound. She should ignore him, go back to bed, marry Marcus in the morning as planned. But her hands were already fumbling with the window latch, pushing it open. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Come down, please, I need to talk to you. It is the middle of the night. If someone sees us." "No one will see us, please, Helena." She should say no. She knew she should say no. But instead, she found herself pulling on her shoes and wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She crept down the stairs of the boarding house, careful not to wake anyone, and slipped out the front door. Will was waiting in the shadow of the building. He dismounted as she approached, and even in the dim light of the moon she could see the intensity in his expression. "I could not let you do it," he said without preamble. "I could not let you marry Marcus knowing what I know." "What do you know?" "That you do not love him. That you are marrying him out of desperation, not desire. That you deserve so much more than a man who talks about contracts and damages." Will took a step closer. "Helena, these past few days with you have been the happiest I have had in years. You are smart and funny and brave, and when you smile at me, I feel like I can do anything. I know I have no right to say this. I know we barely know each other, but I am falling in love with you." Helena felt her breath catch. "Will, I am not rich. My ranch is small and I am barely making ends meet. I cannot offer you luxury or an easy life, but I can offer you a partnership, a real marriage where you matter, where your opinions count and your dreams are as important as mine. He took her hands in his. Marry me, Helena. Not because you need security, but because you want to. Because when I found you in that desert, I did not just save your life. You saved mine too, you just did not know it. Tears were streaming down Helena's face now. I cannot. The money Marcus spent. I will pay him back. I will sell some cattle, take out a loan, whatever it takes. You are worth any price. Your ranch will survive. I will make it work. But Helena, I cannot survive losing you, not now that I have found you. Helena looked up at him, this man who had saved her life and was now offering her his heart, and she knew. She had known from the beginning, really. From the moment he had lifted her onto his horse and held her safe. From the conversations on the porch and the way he looked at her like she was a miracle. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. I think I have been since the moment you gave me water. The smile that broke across Will's face was like the sun rising. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Helena felt like she was finally home. Not in a place, but in a person. This was where she belonged. We need to leave, Will said urgently, before Marcus realizes you are gone, before he can stop us. Where will we go? My ranch for tonight. Tomorrow we will ride to Fort Stockton. There is a preacher there who can marry us. After that, he cupped her face in his hands. After that, we build a life together, whatever that looks like. Helena knew this was insane. She was running away in the middle of the night with a man she had known for less than a week. She was breaking a contract and a promise. By every practical measure, this was the worst decision she could make. But for the first time in her life, Helena did not care about being practical. She cared about being happy. She cared about love. Let me get my things, she said. 5 minutes later, they were riding out of Terlingua, Helena seated on Rosie with her carpetbag, Will on his bay gelding. They rode fast, putting distance between themselves and the town, and when they finally slowed, Helena found herself laughing with pure exhilaration. What is so funny? Will asked, grinning. I just jilted my fiancé and ran away with another man. My mother would be scandalized. What would your father say? Helena thought about it. Her father, who had married her mother against her grandparents' wishes, who had chosen love over security. I think he would understand. They reached Will's ranch as dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Will helped Helena down from her horse, and they stood for a moment in the early morning light, just looking at each other. Are you sure about this? Will asked quietly. Once we do this, there is no going back. Marcus will come after us. He will make trouble. Let him, Helena said. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of making decisions based on what is safe instead of what is right. She reached up and touched his face. You are what is right, Will Johnson. You are what I choose. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Helena felt something shift inside her, something settle into place. This was the man she was meant to find. Not in a carefully arranged correspondence, but in the middle of the desert, when she was lost and dying and desperate. Sometimes Providence worked in mysterious ways. They spent the day preparing for the journey to Fort Stockton, which would take 2 days of riding. Will packed supplies, checked the horses, and wrote a promissory note to Marcus Sullivan for the money owed. He left it with enough cattle to cover the debt, along with instructions for a neighboring rancher to deliver both to Marcus. It will not make him any less angry, Will admitted. But at least he cannot say we cheated him. Helena helped where she could, her mind still reeling from the speed of everything. Yesterday she had been preparing to marry one man. Now she was preparing to marry another, It should have felt reckless and wrong. Instead, it felt like the first truly right thing she had done in years. They left the ranch at first light the next morning, riding east toward Fort Stockton. The journey was long and hot, but Helena did not mind. She was with Will, and that made everything bearable. They talked as they rode, learning more about each other, sharing stories and dreams and fears. "I want children someday," Will confessed on the second day. "A whole houseful if we are blessed. I want to teach them to ride and rope and respect the land. I want to build something that will last beyond me." "How many is a houseful?" Helena asked, amused. "I do not know, 4, 5, as many as you are willing to give me." Helena felt a warm glow in her chest. "I have always wanted children too. I hated being alone as a child. I want my children to have siblings, to have family. Then we are agreed. We will have a large, noisy, chaotic family. And they will all know how their parents met," Helena said with a smile. "How their mother was lost in the desert and their father found her. How I fell in love with her the moment I saw her, half dead and covered in sand," Will added. "That is not romantic. It is the truth. You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even then." They reached Fort Stockton on the afternoon of the second day, dusty and tired but happy. The fort was a military outpost, but it had a small civilian community attached, including a church and a preacher. Will found the preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Coleman, and explained their situation. "We need to be married today, if possible. We have had complications." Reverend Coleman looked from Will to Helena and back again, his expression knowing. "Complications that involve an angry man chasing you, perhaps? Something like that. I see." The Reverend studied them for a long moment. "Do you love each other?" "Yes," they said in unison. "And you are both entering this marriage freely, without coercion?" "Yes," Helena said firmly. "More freely than I have ever done anything in my life." Reverend Coleman smiled. "Then I will marry you. Go clean up a bit, find some witnesses, and meet me at the church in an hour." They did as instructed, washing away the trail dust and changing into their cleanest clothes. Will found 2 soldiers willing to serve as witnesses, and they gathered in the small church as the sun began to set. The ceremony was simple and brief. Reverend Coleman spoke of love and commitment, of the joining of 2 souls. Will and Helena repeated their vows, their voices steady and sure. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Will kissed Helena with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," Will murmured against her lips. "I could never regret it," Helena whispered back. "You gave me more than water that day in the desert. You gave me hope." They spent their wedding night at a small hotel in Fort Stockton, and for the first time, Helena understood what it meant to be truly married. Will was gentle and patient, his touch reverent, his words full of love. When she fell asleep in his arms, Helena felt a peace she had never known before. The next morning they began the journey back to Will's ranch, which was now Helena's ranch too. Her home. The place where she would build her life. They took their time, stopping to rest the horses, talking and laughing and planning their future. "We need to expand the vegetable garden," Helena said. "If we are going to have children, we will need more food, and I want chickens, more chickens, maybe some pigs." "You want to turn my cattle ranch into a farm," Will teased. "I want to turn it into a home. A real home where children can grow and thrive. Then that is what we will do." Will reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever you want, Helena, it is yours." They were 2 days from the ranch when they saw the dust cloud on the horizon. Will tensed, his hand automatically going to the rifle strapped to his saddle. "What is it?" Helena asked. "Riders, coming fast." He squinted into the distance. "Could be nothing. Could be Marcus." It was Marcus. He appeared out of the dust cloud with 3 ranch hands, his face red with anger. He reined in his horse hard enough to make it dance sideways, his eyes fixed on Helena with a fury that made her skin crawl. "You," he spat. "You lying little thief. You took my money and ran off with him." "She did not take anything," Will said, his voice dangerously calm. "I left you a promissory note and cattle to cover the debt. You have been paid back in full. You think cattle make up for the humiliation, for the shame of having my bride stolen?" Marcus's hand moved to the gun at his hip. "I should shoot you where you sit." "You could try," Will said quietly. "But I am a fair shot, Marcus, and I do not think you want to find out which of us is faster." The 2 men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Helena felt her heart pounding, afraid that this would end in violence. But then one of Marcus's ranch hands spoke up. "Boss, the law is not on our side here. He paid you back and she married him legal. If you shoot him, it is murder." Marcus's jaw worked, his hand still on his gun. "She was mine." "She was never yours," Will said flatly. "She was never anyone's property. She is a person with her own mind and her own choices. And she chose me. Because you poisoned her against me. Because you filled her head with romantic nonsense." "No," Helena said, finding her voice. "Because you treated me like a business transaction. Because when you looked at me, you saw a housekeeper and a broodmare, not a partner." She lifted her chin, meeting his angry gaze. "Will saved my life, but I saved my own soul when I chose him over you." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, the anger fading to something that might have been grudging respect. He took his hand away from his gun. "You are a fool," he said to Helena. "He has no money, no future. You will live in poverty." "I would rather be poor and loved than rich and miserable," Helena replied. Marcus shook his head in disgust. "Keep her, Johnson. May you both get what you deserve." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his ranch hands following. Will and Helena watched until they disappeared over the horizon. Then Will let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that could have gone worse." Helena started to laugh, half from relief and half from the absurdity of it all. "We just faced down my angry former fiancé in the middle of the desert. I think my life has become very strange. Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." They reached the ranch the next day, and Helena felt a surge of joy as the familiar buildings came into view. This was home now. This was where she belonged. Will helped her down from her horse, and they stood together in the yard, looking at the house, the barn, the corrals. "It is not much," Will said quietly, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Helena assured him. "It is everything I need." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Helena took over the running of the household, bringing an efficiency and organization that the bachelor ranch had been sorely lacking. She expanded the vegetable garden as planned, planted herbs, and indeed acquired more chickens and 2 pigs. Will worked the cattle, mended fences, and negotiated a better deal with the traveling trader using Helena's advice. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the desert, talking about their day, making plans for the future. Will taught Helena to ride better, to shoot, to understand the rhythms of ranch life. Helena taught Will about books and music, about the world beyond the desert, about the dreams she had held in her heart for so long. 3 months after their marriage, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Will one morning over breakfast, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "Careful," she protested. "You will hurt the baby." "I will never hurt either of you," Will promised, setting her down gently. "You are the most precious things in my life." Their son was born the following May, a healthy baby boy with his father's gray-green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Will's father. Will cried when he held his son for the first time, his rough hands impossibly gentle as he cradled the tiny life they had created together. "He is perfect," Will whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Helena. Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on me." Helena smiled, tired but happy. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me water and a future." Samuel was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Margaret, called Maggie, who had Helena's dark hair and stubborn chin. Then came William Jr., called Billy, who was quieter than his siblings but had his father's way with animals. And finally, twins, a boy and girl they named Thomas and Rose. The ranch grew along with their family. Will, with Helena's business acumen guiding him, expanded the herd, bought back the water rights, and even purchased adjacent land. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Years passed in a blur of work and laughter, of children growing and learning, of quiet moments stolen between the demands of ranch and family. Will taught their sons to rope and ride, while Helena taught their daughters to read and figure accounts. But all the children learned everything, because Helena insisted that her daughters be as capable as her sons, and Will saw no reason to disagree. On their 10th anniversary, Will took Helena back to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. It was early evening, the desert painted in shades of gold and amber by the setting sun. "You remember?" Will asked, standing in the exact place where Helena had lain dying. "I remember thinking I was going to die," Helena said. "And then I saw you and I thought you were an angel." "I was no angel, just a cowboy who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You were my angel," Helena insisted. She turned to face him, taking his hands. "That day changed everything. If the stagecoach had not hit that boulder, if you had not been tracking strays, if you had ridden in any other direction, we never would have met. I would have found you somehow," Will said with conviction. "Maybe not in the desert, maybe not that day. But I believe we were meant to find each other. That is fate." "I used to think fate was cruel," Helena admitted. "Taking my parents, leaving me alone, but maybe fate was just getting me to exactly where I needed to be. Lost in the desert, lost until you found me." Will pulled her close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "I will always find you, Helena, no matter where you are, no matter how lost you feel. That is my promise." They stood together as the sun set. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a life of love and laughter and meaning. The desert stretched out around them, vast and unforgiving, the same desert that had nearly claimed Helena's life a decade before. But it was also the desert that had brought them together, that had given them each other. And for that, Helena would always be grateful. They returned to the ranch as darkness fell, riding side by side, their hands linked between the horses. Their children were waiting, gathered on the porch, and Samuel, now 10, called out to them. "Ma, Pa, Aunt Martha sent a letter. She is coming to visit." Martha was Will's sister from Kansas, who had been trying to make the trip for years but had been delayed by her own growing family. Helena smiled, already planning how they would accommodate the visitors. "How many is she bringing?" she called back. "All of them. Her husband and the 4 kids," Will groaned good-naturedly. "Our house is going to burst at the seams." "Then we will burst," Helena said happily. "The more family, the better." They dismounted and were immediately swarmed by children, all talking at once about Aunt Martha's letter and the cousins they would get to meet. Will met Helena's eyes over the chaos, and she saw her own contentment reflected there. This was the life they had built. Not perfect, not easy, but full of love and purpose and joy. Helena thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and alone, stepping onto that stagecoach bound for a loveless marriage. That woman would never have imagined this future. A husband who adored her, children who filled her days with noise and laughter, a home that was truly hers. She had been looking for security when she left Philadelphia. What she had found was so much more. She had found partnership, passion, and a love that had grown stronger with every passing year. She had found a place where she mattered, where her opinions were valued and her dreams supported. She had found, quite simply, everything she had never dared to hope for. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was finally quiet, Helena and Will lay in bed together, talking in low voices about the day and the upcoming visit and the thousand small details of their shared life. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had married Marcus? Will asked suddenly. Helena considered it. Sometimes, I think I would have been miserable. Oh, I would have had security, a comfortable house, probably children eventually. But there would have been no joy in it, no partnership, just obligation and duty. He married again, you know. About 6 months after you left, another mail-order bride. I hope she is happier with him than I would have been. I heard she runs his household with an iron fist and has him completely under her thumb, Will said with amusement. Apparently she is quite formidable, Helena laughed. Good for her. Maybe that is what he needed, someone strong enough to stand up to him. I am glad it was not you, though. Will rolled to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. I am glad you were the one who fell off that stagecoach. I am glad I was the one who found you. I am glad for every choice and chance that brought us to this moment. So am I, Helena whispered. I love you, Will Johnson. I love you, Helena Johnson, today, tomorrow, and every day after. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had every night for 10 years, the way they would every night for the rest of their lives. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. They lost cattle in a hard winter, but recouped the losses the following year. The children grew and thrived, Samuel showing a talent for ranching that made Will's chest swell with pride, Maggie developing a love for horses that rivaled her father's, Billy surprising everyone with a beautiful singing voice, and the twins proving to be natural scholars. When Samuel turned 18, he told his parents he wanted to start his own spread rather than simply take over the family ranch. Will and Helena helped him buy a piece of land adjoining theirs and watched with pride as their eldest son built his own future. Maggie, to no one's surprise, married a horse breeder and moved to New Mexico, though she visited often. Billy studied music and eventually became a music teacher, traveling between small towns and bringing joy through song. The twins both went to the new university in Austin, Thomas studying law and Rose becoming one of the few female doctors in Texas. Will and Helena watched their children leave with bittersweet hearts, proud of who they had become but missing the noise and chaos of a full house. But the children always came back, bringing spouses and grandchildren, filling the ranch with laughter once more. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party. The house and yard were packed with family and friends, with neighbors who had become like family over the years. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and speeches that made both Will and Helena tear up. 25 years ago, Samuel said, standing to toast his parents, my mother was lost in the desert and my father found her. He gave her water and she gave him a future. Together, they built all of this. He gestured around at the gathered crowd. A family, a home, a legacy. They taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. To choose each other, to support each other, to build something together that is greater than what you could build alone. He raised his glass. To Ma and Pa, may they have 25 more years together. To Ma and Pa, the crowd echoed. Helena wiped tears from her eyes as Will pulled her close. 25 years, he murmured. Best years of my life. Mine too, Helena agreed. Every single one of them. They did get those 25 more years and then some. They grew old together, their hands becoming gnarled with age but still reaching for each other. They slowed down as the years passed, letting Samuel take over more of the ranch work, spending their days on the porch watching the desert and talking about everything and nothing. Helena never forgot those hours she had spent dying in the sand, the moment when Will had appeared like a miracle. She never took for granted the life they had built together, the family they had created. Every morning when she woke up next to Will, every evening when they watched the sunset together, she felt grateful. They were in their 70s when Will's health began to fail. It was his heart, the doctor said, worn out from a lifetime of hard work. Helena nursed him through the decline with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything in her life. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, telling him stories about their life together. "You remember," she said one evening, "when we went back to the desert on our 10th anniversary?" "I remember," Will said, his voice weak but steady. "You said I was your angel. You still are. You always will be." "Helena," Will squeezed her hand. "I am not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of leaving you. Do not leave me yet," Helena whispered. "I am not ready." "I do not think we ever are." He smiled at her, that same crooked smile that had stolen her heart all those years ago. "But what a life we have had! What a beautiful, wonderful life!" He died 3 days later, surrounded by his children and grandchildren with Helena holding his hand. She felt the moment he left, felt the absence like a physical pain. But even through the grief, she felt gratitude. They had been given 53 years together, which was more than many people ever got. They had loved and been loved, had built a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Helena lived 5 more years without Will, staying on the ranch with Samuel and his family. She watched her grandchildren grow, met her great-grandchildren, and filled journals with the stories of her life, so that future generations would know where they came from. She was 82 when she died peacefully in her sleep, in the same bed where Will had first brought her after finding her in the desert. Her children buried her next to Will under a cottonwood tree at the edge of the ranch, where they could overlook the land they had built together. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, Samuel had inscribed a single line. She was lost, and he found her. Together they found home. The ranch continued for generations after them, passed down through the family, each new generation adding to the legacy that Will and Helena had begun. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. A reminder that sometimes fate works in mysterious ways, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best, and that love, real love, is always worth the risk. The desert, where Will had found Helena, remained unchanged, vast and harsh and beautiful. Every so often, a member of the family would ride out to that spot and stand there for a moment, thinking about the unlikely chance that had brought them all into being. A boulder, a fall, a cowboy tracking strays, and a woman who chose love over security. From such small moments, entire worlds are born. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Will and Helena had given their descendants. Not the ranch or the land or the material wealth they had accumulated, but the example of a love that endured through every trial, every hardship, every challenge. They had shown that it was possible to build a life of meaning and joy. That family was not just about blood but about choice and commitment, and showing up for each other every single day. The mail-order bride who had been lost in the desert had found more than just water and rescue. She had found a partner, a purpose, and a love that lasted beyond death. And the cowboy who had found her had discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures are lying right in front of you, half buried in sand, waiting to be saved. their story became more than just family history. It became a testament to hope, to the power of second chances, to the idea that our lowest moments can lead to our greatest joys. It reminded everyone who heard it that love is not always convenient or expected, that it does not always make practical sense, but that when it is real, when it is true, it is the most powerful force in the world. And so the legacy of Will and Helena Johnson lived on, in the land they had worked, in the children and grandchildren who carried their names and their values, in the story that was passed down through generations as a reminder of where they had come from and what really mattered in life. Two people who had met by chance in the harsh Texas desert in the summer of 1882. A woman who had been dying of thirst, a man who had given her water. And from that single act of compassion, an entire lifetime of love had bloomed, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest of gestures, and that home is not always a place but a person who sees you, saves you, and chooses you every single day for the rest of their life.